Hey guys, Max92 and welcome back to another tryout. Today's tryout is on a lot. DiRT 3, DiRT Showdown, WRC 7, V-Rally 4, and DiRT 5. And I'm also going to talk about WRC 6 and WRC 8 a little bit, but not too much because I've already talked about them in another tryout, which is why I'm making this video. For some reason, my video on WRC 6 and WRC 8 has just grown to be my second most viewed video on the channel. And so I figure I may as well make sort of a sequel to that and hopefully try and catch that lightning in a bottle a second time. No, I probably won't, and I'm going to try to keep this from getting too long with all the things I'm going to talk about. But yeah, so I'm not messing around, I'm not changing any accent colors. We got my colors today, orange and blue, instead of any colors based on any game. So, we're going to start here. First off, some background on me in case you haven't seen any other video where I talk about a racing game. I am sort of into some arcade and simulation style racers, but the game that I play the most is the Forza Horizon series for the most part. I played through 1 and 2, and I've moved on to 3, and I think I have 4, but I haven't started yet because I'm playing 3. So I'm behind, but I'm trying to play as much of them as I want to do of them before I move on to the next one, because I started later with them. And I also have, in the past, I grew up on Need for Speed games. I have played Forza Motorsport 4. I've played some other games here and there, but I'm more on the arcade side of things, and so I do have this preference towards Forza in terms of my sort of more simulation-style games. But I've got a little bit of experience, so I just want to get that background. We're going to be talking about these games in order from the oldest to the newest. So, to start with, we're going to start with DiRT 3. So this is based off playing about 30 minutes of DiRT 3. DiRT 3, I played it on an Xbox Series X, and I played it via backwards compatibility, because it's an Xbox 360 game. And this game came out in 2011, and as such, man, it looks like it came out in 2011. Not even graphically, just its aesthetic. It's just like, I can't explain it, you just look at it. I think you'll understand what I'm saying. It's just got this very dated aesthetic, and I personally find the aesthetic that UI brings into existence kind of miserable to deal with. I don't particularly like it. It's a bit too much, in my opinion. But that's just sort of a UI complaints. Otherwise, I think it's a pretty solid racer. This is sort of in the simcade, it's a more arcadey side of simulation racing, and it's DiRT. I've learned in doing some of the little research I did for this video that the DiRT series is a spin-off of the Colin McRae Rally series. Did not realize that. So the first 2 DiRT games were Colin McRae's DiRT, and then as of DiRT 3, they dropped the Colin McRae. But yeah, this game features some features that I know well from Forza, including the sort of rewind mechanic and the driving line, which are things that, again, I play mostly Forza. It's sort of yeah, this sort of helps me feel at home here a little bit. But compared to the other games on this list, and Forza obviously, I don't know that I'll come back and play more of DiRT 3. It's just very of its time, and there are better games in the DiRT series that have come out since then. So, as of 2022, I'm gonna call DiRT 3 a fail. Next up on the list here is DiRT Showdown. DiRT Showdown, I played again 30 minutes of it. That's what I'm basing my little opinion here on. It's about 30 minutes of gameplay. And this I also played on the Xbox Series X via backwards compatibility because it's also an Xbox 360 game. This game came out in 2012, so the year after DiRT 3, and it has a similar muchness in its aesthetic, but I personally find the aesthetic of DiRT Showdown a little more palatable, personally. And so the UI aesthetic, it's just as dated as 3, But I think this specific brand of aesthetic is a bit less too much for me, to where it's not as annoying to deal with. But it's still a bit much, I think. However, this differs from Dirt 3 in that it's almost like just full arcade. This is something that's pretty akin to sort of like Flat Out or Burnout, if you've played those, which are other games that I played growing up that I liked quite a bit. There's sort of these Demolition Derby style races and literal Demolition Derby car fights, stuff like that you're doing. In some of the reviews I saw while skimming Wikipedia, it said that it was probably priced too high for like the level of game it is compared to other games of the Dirt series, but because of how standout it is in terms of its gameplay, I might actually come back and play this one, because I don't have a Burnout or a Flat Out or anything. Those aren't series that have persisted very much into the now. And I don't have one that I play very often. So I might actually come back and play more of Dirt Showdown. And as such, as is how this show works, that means the game passes. Which, cool. So the next game up in terms of timeline would be WRC 6. I talked about this in a previous video, so you can go watch the WRC 6 versus WRC 8 video to get my detailed opinions there. This game came out on the Xbox One, and I believe I had the Series X by that point, so I think I was playing it on that, but I can't remember for sure. But this game came out in 2016, and like I said, already talked about this in detail, but it did fail that tryout. If you want to know the details why, you can go watch that video, but it did fail the tryout, so keep that in mind. Following WRC 6 is WRC 7. WRC 7, I played for about 45 minutes. I played it on PC, and this game came out in 2017. This is very similar to WRC 6, and I think it maybe plays a little bit better, but it's been such an amount of time since I played WRC 6 that I can't really remember it in that much detail. While it's definitely solid, and it's more of like a simulation management situation than the Dirt series, I'm really bad at the WRC games for some reason. I don't entirely know what it is. It's probably because I have a lot more aggressive racing style, and that's not particularly suited for one sort of very simulation heavy off-road, like tight tracks, and also games that don't have the rewind mechanic that Forza does, because I abuse the heck out of the rewind mechanic in Forza, at least in single player stuff, because I don't want to have to restart the whole race because I missed a turn or something. But this is the WRC games are definitely not my preference for racing games and racing simulators, but I get why they would be popular, because they have this management part of it that seems that it can get really in depth, especially in later games. But WRC 7, like WRC 6, also failed its tryout. As for the next game on the list, that was V-Rally 4, and for V-Rally 4 I played for around 30 minutes. It's an Xbox One game that I played on the Xbox Series X, and that game came out in 2018. This is the same dev and publisher as the WRC games, which is why it's absolutely baffling to me that it is so much worse than WRC 7, WRC 6. I don't know why it just feels worse to play, it looks worse, and I even think it sounds just worse. I don't understand. It is literally the same developer using the same publisher. I assume it's got to be something to do with having the lack of the sponsorship of the FIA and whatnot. So there's just less money that was put towards this project. But I honestly think it's worse than WRC 6. And I think that's a solid game. This is just not it's okay. It's okay. It's playable. But it's sort of in even just in other games, rally racing games, by this same developer. Why would you pick this one? Like, it seems like this is a series that has a little bit of a history, and that history does not start with this developer. It starts long ago with, I think, Infogrames. So, like, this is an older series that has just been, like, the IP was passed around and it ended up in the hands of this developer. But, like, this just doesn't even stand up to the other games that they've made, the WRC. So I just don't get it. I just don't understand why they let this be so much worse. And obviously it fails. And so the next game on the list here is WRC 8. And like I've already mentioned, did that video, WRC 6 versus WRC 8. Talked about it there. I played this. This is an Xbox One game. Like I mentioned, I think I played it on the Series X, but I cannot remember for certain. And this game came out in 2019. I talked about it in that previous video, so I won't get into detail here, but WRC 8 failed its tryout over there, so that ruling stands. And for the final game on the list here, Dirt 5. I played Dirt 5 for about an hour and a half. Half of that time, or well, 2/3 of that time was on the PlayStation 5, but a lot of the time on PlayStation 5 was messing around with settings. And then I played another like 30-40 minutes on the Xbox Series X because I had access to it on both platforms, so I figured I might as well. And this game came out in 2020. I mentioned that I spent a bunch of time screwing around in settings on the PlayStation 5, and that was because it took me a long time to get like brightness dialed in on the PlayStation 5 to where the game didn't look too bright or too dark, to where like the sky wasn't entirely washed out. And I had a similar situation with the Xbox, but it took me less time to get it dialed in. But for some reason, I just had a lot of trouble getting the settings dialed in on the PlayStation 5, and I'm not sure, like, it had HDR settings rather than the just brightness and gamma that the Xbox had. For whatever reason, I played on the same TV, so I'm not sure why. But just for whatever reason, I just had a lot of trouble with that. But otherwise, I enjoyed this game the most out of any of the games I played for this video. This game is also more on the arcade side of simulation, so like a simcade. But like, the aesthetic, it's got this like very particular aesthetic that's appealing to this sort of like underground dirt racing sentimentality, like the sort of what do you want to call it? X Games type people. I can't think of the term right now. The extreme sports crowd. But like, it's definitely like more of a toned down like version of that than what has been seen, what we saw in the other two dirt games that are in the video. And it's a lot more interesting than the sort of very bland, I guess, look of WRC, where it's very like professional. Rather, it doesn't have this sort of like, woo, yeah, racing. It's more of like, we are professionals, and we like act like very professional. It doesn't have the same like vibe. It's sort of a different audience a bit. I thought this game handled wonderfully with a controller, where like in some of the other games, especially V-Rally 4, like there was this, like, I don't think that like the best experience. I'm not having the best experience here using an analog stick, and it might be better with a racing wheel. With Dirt 5, it was like, this just feels perfect on a controller. Just the turning, just perfection on that controller. It's like, wow, that just handles like a Need for Speed there a little bit. Not quite, but like it just has that like very like, it just feels good to play. As I mentioned, I think this one's the best game they talk about in the video, and it might actually get me to branch out a little bit from Forza to play, some other simulation, arcade-y sort of games. Even if Dirt 5 does not have some of the things that I appreciate from Forza, like a rewind system, I just think it plays good enough that I might come back and play more of it. And as is the situation here, if I'm going to come play more, it's past its tryout. That's how a tryout works.
Left 4 tight. caution, left 4, short, over crest, into right 5, into left 3, long, don't cut, under bridge.
So, to recap, tried out a whole bunch of games. Dirt 5 and Dirt Showdown were the ones that passed. The rest of them failed the tryouts. I'm probably not going to play any more of them. And if you're interested, I'm going to do a little ranking here. Number 1, Dirt 5. Second place, Dirt Showdown. Third place, WRC 8. Fourth place is Dirt 3. For 5th/6th place, I have WRC 6 and 7. They're tied. And then down at last place is V-Rally 4. I think pretty much any of them are good enough. Like, if you really want a WRC game, there's one that came out this year, there's one that came out last year, that might be decent enough updates to 8 that you could pick those up instead of any of the ones I've listed here. But they're all relatively solid, and they're going to probably be incremental improvements over time. So maybe pick up 9 or 10 instead of 6, 7, or 8, but do what you want. I think I like my sim racers a little bit more on the arcade side, so I'm probably a little biased against the WRC games a little bit, and more, interested in things like the Dirt series. But, that's just because, I don't play with a racing wheel, I play with a controller. And I imagine that if I had a racing setup with wheel and pedals and all that, and maybe some of the force feedback, I might have a better time with the more strictly simulation games. But those are expensive, so I don't have one. So, yeah, Dirt 5 is cool. Check that out if you're into racing games. And Dirt Showdown is kind of interesting. And the WRC games are passable if you're into, very simulation, management type things. That might be where you want to go. I probably will mostly just stick to Forza. But, Forza's not explicitly a rally off-road type of thing. So, if you're into rally games, there are plenty. And it's probably Dirt that you're going to want to go with. Dirt 5, Dirt Rally 2.0, which I have not talked about, but it seems to be that people like that. I'm rambling a bit, but hopefully, like the first video, the previous one, where about WRC 6 and 8, this one gets picked up by the algorithm the same way, and also gets a bunch of views for no reason, but who knows? I thought this was kind of fun to do. I rather than sort of make it take a whole long and just do little matchups of the rest of these games, I just grab the rest of them that I seem to own, toss them all in the same video, and call it a day. Just pick them off from all the different platforms I own them on, mostly the Xbox. But just play them all for one video and make it an extra long, kind of special video. But yeah, sort of tried to race through that because I didn't want it to take too long. So we're done in 20 minutes or so. So probably shorter for you in the final edit. And I'm going to be done now. So you got a description, find links to all my places, Twitter, Patreon, Redbubble, Bandcamp, all sorts of links down there. Click them, go to where they go, follow, do the things you do there. Like the video if you liked it, dislike the video if you didn't. Leave a comment. Subscribe. Do you play racing games? I like racing games. Leave a comment. Share the video. Do the things. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.